Welcome to our deep dive into Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex.
Yeah.
It's really a fascinating book.
Oh, yeah.
Especially considering it came out way back in 1949.
Oh, it was groundbreaking when it was published.
Yeah.
Like, it totally changed how people thought about women's role in society.
Yeah, I mean...
And it's still relevant today.
Yeah, it really is.
So many of the issues she raises are things we're still grappling with.
Absolutely.
It's kind of crazy to think how ahead of her time she was.
So before we dive in,
Yeah.
could you give us a quick overview of what The Second Sex is all about?
Yeah.
Like, what are the main themes?
Oh, sure.
What's the big idea here?
Okay, so the central concept is woman as other.
Okay, woman as other.
Yeah.
What does that even mean?
Well, basically it means that throughout history, women have been defined in relation to men.
Okay.
Like they're not seen as individuals in their own right, but rather as the opposite of men.
So like a negative image, kind of?
Exactly. It's like men are considered the standard, the norm.
Right.
And women are only defined by how they differ from that.
I see. So it's not just about being different,
No.
but about being seen as less than.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the really insidious part.
It's
not just a difference, it's a
Right.
hierarchy.
Yeah, a hierarchy where men are at the top.
Exactly.
And to really understand how deep this idea goes, de Beauvoir takes us all the way back to the beginning.
Yeah, to like primitive societies.
Really?
Yeah.
So even before we had organized civilizations, this idea of women being other was already there.
Well, yeah, in those early societies,
Okay.
motherhood was obviously central to women's lives, right?
Makes sense.
And that meant they were closely tied to nature, to the biological realm,
Okay.
while men were out doing things like hunting and making tools.
So they were shaping the world around them.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see how that division of labor could lead to men being seen as more...
Active.
Yeah.
And women as more passive.
But wait a minute. Didn't those same primitive societies also have goddesses?
Oh, they absolutely did.
I mean,
Yeah.
they worshipped powerful female figures like
Ishtar. Yeah.
Sibyl,
Yeah.
all these powerful goddesses.
So how do we reconcile that
Yeah.
with this idea of woman as other?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because on the one hand,
Yeah.
you have this deep respect for women, for their connection to nature, for their ability to give life.
Right.
They're seen as powerful, divine even. But on the other hand,
Yeah.
they're still being told they're less than men.
That's so contradictory.
It is. It's a total paradox.
So how does that even work?
Well, I think the key here is that even though these goddesses were worshipped,
Okay.
it was still men who held the power.
Uh-huh.
They were the ones defining the image of the goddess,
Right.
controlling her.
And ultimately deciding how women should behave.
That's it. It's like this weird double standard,
Women are revered.
but also controlled.
Yeah.
And as societies evolved
Yes.
and moved away from these mystical beliefs, developed more structured
Yeah.
social and economic systems,
Right.
things shifted even further.
In favor of men.
Yes, in favor of men.
Yeah. This is when we see the rise of what we call patriarchy.
Okay, so for those of us who haven't spent hours reading feminist theory,
Yeah.
can you break down what patriarchy actually means?
Sure. So basically imagine a system
Okay.
where men hold all the power.
Okay.
They make the rules, they control the resources, and they get to define what's considered valuable.
And in this system,
Yeah.
women are essentially property.
Well, in a way, yes.
Okay.
First, they belong to their fathers, and then they're transferred to their husbands through marriage.
So women's value is tied to their role within the family unit.
Exactly. Not as individuals in their own right.
And their lives are controlled by all these strict social codes.
Yeah, emphasizing things like chastity and obedience.
Right, so it's a system designed to keep women subservient.
Totally.
And this had some pretty horrific consequences, right?
Unfortunately.
Like the practice of female infanticide in some cultures.
It's a really disturbing example.
Yeah.
But it shows just how little value is placed on female life in some societies.
It's heartbreaking to even think about.
Yeah.
So how did this all play out in a society like ancient Greece?
Oh, good question.
A culture we often think of as
Advanced, right. Well, even in ancient Greece,
Okay.
with all its philosophy and democracy, women were still confined to the home,
Really?
excluded from public life,
Wow.
and generally viewed with suspicion and disdain.
It's like all those great ideas about democracy didn't really apply to women.
I mean, not really.
De Beauvoir quotes.
Oh, yeah, she quotes.
All sorts of prominent Greek figures like,
Whoa.
like Aristotle,
Yeah.
who basically saw women as like defective men.
I know, it's crazy.
I remember reading this line from Hesiod.
Oh, yeah, the poet.
Yeah, who said, "He who confides in a woman confides in a thief."
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Wild, right?
Total.
So much of Greek literature is about...
Warning men about women.
Yes, warning men about women.
It's like they're so afraid of them.
And it's even wilder when you consider that they were saying all this while keeping women isolated and controlled.
Yeah. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost.
Right.
If you limit women's opportunities and then criticize them for not being more, you're creating the very problem you're complaining about.
Okay, so now let's jump ahead a few centuries.
Okay, here we go.
To a period that offered at least a glimmer of hope.
Okay.
For women's rights. The French Revolution.
Yes.
This is where we meet figures like Olympe de Gouges.
Such a badass.
So tell me about her. What does she do?
Well, she was this amazing playwright and activist who dared to demand equal rights for women.
Whoa, during the French Revolution?
Yeah, right in the thick of it.
That's incredible.
She even drafted a Declaration of the Rights of Woman and the Female Citizen.
So while everyone else was focused on liberty and equality, she was like, hey, what about women?
Exactly. She was way ahead of her time.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it was a really bold move.
So what happened?
Sadly, it didn't go over so well.
Oh, no.
She was labeled an enemy of the revolution and eventually executed.
That's awful.
Yeah, it's a tragic story.
It shows how entrenched the idea of male dominance was.
Yeah.
Even during this period of supposed radical change.
It's a reminder that progress isn't always a straight line.
Definitely not.
And as we move into the Industrial Revolution, we see a whole new set of challenges emerging for women.
So even as technology advanced and society was supposedly progressing, women were still facing oppression.
Yeah, in no indifferent ways.
Like what?
Well, the rise of factories created new forms of exploitation.
How so?
Well, de Beauvoir quotes Marx, who observed that factory owners actually preferred to hire married women.
Married women?
Yeah, with families.
Why?
Well, because they were more desperate for work.
Makes sense.
To support their family, which meant they were more likely to accept terrible working conditions and lower wages.
Yeah. They were
cheap and easily controlled labor.
So basically they were being exploited.
Yeah, exactly.
And on top of that, they were still expected to
run a household.
Manage a household.
Take care of the kids.
It's like a double burden.
A double burden, yeah.
No matter what era we're talking about, women are constantly facing these impossible expectations.
It's a recurring theme throughout history, unfortunately.
So we've gone from primitive societies to the French Revolution to the Industrial Revolution.
Right.
And it's clear that this idea of woman as other...
It's persistent.
It's incredibly persistent.
Yeah, it's like this underlying thread connecting all these different periods.
So where do we go from here?
Well, that's what we'll be exploring.
Okay.
In the next part of our deep dive.
All right, I'm ready.
We'll see how women in the 20th century confronted these age-old ideas and started to carve out a new path for themselves.
Even in the face of these persistent challenges.
Oh, yeah. It's a fascinating story.
Can't wait to hear it. Welcome back. So last time we kind of left off with this idea of woman as other being super persistent.
Oh, it's definitely a recurring theme.
Through all of history.
Yeah, throughout history.
Now we're entering the 20th century, a time of massive social change.
Oh, yeah. Huge shifts happening.
Did things finally start to shift for women, too?
Well, it's a more complicated picture.
How so?
On one hand, women were gaining more freedom, right?
Okay.
Entering the workforce in larger numbers. Fighting for the right to vote.
Yeah.
Challenging traditional expectations.
So it sounds like progress.
It was progress.
But there's always a but, isn't there?
Well, let's just say those old habits die hard.
What do you mean?
De Beauvoir argues that even with all this progress, women were still bumping up against these deep-seated assumptions.
About what it means to be a woman.
Exactly. Like society still had these fixed ideas about what women should be.
So even though they had more freedom on paper, they were still trapped by these expectations.
In a way, yeah.
It sounds exhausting.
It was. De Beauvoir talks about this tension a lot.
Okay.
The conflicting desires women experience, this pressure to conform to societal norms.
Right.
And this struggle to define yourself on your own terms.
And all while living in a world that still sees you through a male lens.
Oh, that male lens is so important.
It is.
That's the male gaze she talks about.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that term.
It's a big one.
But can you explain it in a way that, like...
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense to someone who's not a gender studies professor.
Okay, so imagine you're constantly being watched and judged.
Okay.
Based on how appealing you are to men.
Ooh, that's uncomfortable.
Right. That's the male gaze in a nutshell.
So it reduces women.
So objects.
Objects of desire.
Exactly.
It's like you're always on stage.
Performing for an audience of men.
Even when you're just trying to live your life.
And that scrutiny.
Yeah.
Can be so damaging.
To a woman's sense of self-worth.
It can make you feel like your value comes from...
being desirable to men.
Yes. Rather than your own qualities and accomplishments.
And this isn't just about...
like media.
Yeah, media or advertising.
It's deeper than that.
So much deeper.
It's baked into the fabric of society.
Okay, so how does that even work?
De Beauvoir talks about how girls are conditioned from a young age to see themselves through this male lens.
What do you mean?
They learn to prioritize their appearance. Seek validation from men.
Oh, I totally relate to that.
Yeah.
I remember being so self-conscious as a teenager.
Yeah.
Constantly worrying about how boys perceived me.
It's crazy how ingrained those ideas are.
And de Beauvoir argues?
She argues that this conditioning can have long-lasting psychological effects.
Like what?
She explores themes of narcissism and masochism in women.
Okay, those are some heavy topics.
They are.
How do those connect to the male gaze?
Okay, well, think about it this way.
Okay.
Narcissism can be a way of overcompensating. For a lack of self-esteem.
I see.
Like you try to project this image of power and desirability.
Right.
But it's masking inner insecurities.
Okay.
And those insecurities often stem from feeling like your worth is determined by how men see you.
So you're trying to become...
the perfect image.
The perfect image of what men want.
Even if it means losing yourself in the process.
Whoa.
And then on the flip side,
yeah,
masochism.
Okay.
It can involve finding pleasure.
In
submitting to the will of another.
Okay.
As a way of like avoiding responsibility.
Interesting.
Or the challenges of true autonomy.
So both narcissism and masochism can be seen as ways of coping with this feeling of being defined as other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
De Beauvoir is making a really subtle point here.
It's about how these psychological patterns can emerge from these larger social forces.
And she doesn't stop there.
What else?
She dives into the complexities of female sexuality.
Oh, boy.
Exploring everything from those awkward adolescent years.
Oh, yeah, I remember those.
To the challenges of finding fulfilling relationships.
Especially
in a world dominated by the male gaze.
She's really not holding back.
Nope. She's going all in.
So what were some of her key insights about female sexuality?
Well, for one, she challenges this idea that women's sexuality is passive or purely receptive.
Okay.
She argues that women are just as capable experiencing desire and pleasure.
Okay, but that seems...
obvious.
Yeah, kind of obvious now.
Remember, this was 1949.
True.
These ideas were super radical.
It's amazing how much those old ideas still linger.
Yeah, it takes time to change these deep-seated beliefs.
Now, one specific aspect of female sexuality that she focuses on is...
the allure of the impossible man.
The impossible man. What's that?
It's like that brooding hero.
Okay.
Or the unattainable love interest.
Oh, yeah, we see those all the time.
Right, in movies, books.
So why are women drawn to these impossible men?
De Beauvoir suggests it might be tied to that desire for validation and love, combined with a fear of true intimacy.
So it's easier to fantasize
about an idealized figure
than to deal with a real person.
Who's flawed and messy.
So it's like a way of avoiding
the vulnerability of real relationships.
It makes sense.
And of course, it often sets women up for disappointment.
Because that fantasy never matches reality.
Exactly.
Speaking of societal expectations and potential disappointment, let's talk about marriage.
Oh, boy.
De Beauvoir's not exactly...
a fan.
No, she's pretty critical of it.
In what way?
She acknowledges that it can offer security, companionship, love.
Right, the traditional stuff. But she also points out how it traps women domestic roles.
Okay.
That can be really stifling.
Yeah, I can see that.
She makes this brilliant comparison.
What is it?
Between housework and the myth of Sisyphus.
Sisyphus?
Yeah, you know, the guy who's constantly pushing that boulder uphill.
And just rolls back down?
Exactly. That's what housework can feel like.
Oh my God, yeah.
This never-ending cycle of chores.
With no real end in sight.
And that can lead to...
like a sense of emptiness?
Yeah, meaninglessness.
Not that housework is bad.
No.
But it shouldn't be.
The defining aspect of a woman's life.
Exactly. De Beauvoir is all about autonomy,
self-realization,
finding fulfillment beyond those traditional roles.
Yes.
So how do women find that fulfillment within a system that seems designed to limit their options?
Well, she explores a few different avenues.
Like what?
She talks about religion, acknowledging that it can be a double-edged sword.
How so?
It can reinforce traditional gender roles, but it can also offer a sense of spiritual equality.
Interesting.
This connection to something larger than yourself.
I see.
And she also highlights the power of creative expression.
Okay.
Showing how women throughout history have used art.
Yeah.
Music literature.
As outlets for their voices.
Exactly. Think of figures like Virginia Woolf.
Okay.
Sylvia Plath, Frida Kahlo.
Using their art to break free.
Yeah. To challenge those limiting definitions.
It's inspiring to think about.
It is. Art can be a powerful form of resistance.
But all this talk about limitations,
It
challenges,
can feel heavy.
It can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, but de Beauvoir doesn't just offer a critique.
Okay.
She also outlines a path to true liberation.
Okay, bring on the hope.
That's what we'll be diving into in the final part.
Can't wait. All right, so we've made it to the final part of our deep dive into the second sex.
Yeah.
And
the moment of truth.
Yeah, like how do we actually move beyond this idea of woman as other?
That's the big question, right?
Yeah. After all this exploring, all this history and philosophy.
And the challenges.
Does de Beauvoir give us any answers?
She does.
Okay, good.
She offers this really powerful vision for change.
I like powerful vision.
Yeah, it's inspiring.
So tell me more.
Okay, so she argues that true liberation for women requires a fundamental shift.
Okay. A shift in what?
In both individual consciousness and societal structures.
So it's not enough to just change the laws?
No, it's got to be deeper than that.
Like we need a real transformation.
A transformation of how we think about gender.
Yeah.
For both women and men.
Okay, so where do we even begin?
Well, de Beauvoir emphasizes the importance of individual choice.
Okay.
Self-determination.
They're like taking control of your own life.
Yeah, exactly. She urges women to reject those predefined paths
that society lays out for them
and instead forge their own destinies.
That sounds amazing.
Right.
And it's easier said than done.
There's still so much pressure to conform.
Oh, absolutely.
Even today. Yeah, it's a constant battle.
But de Beauvoir believes that
liberation starts with recognizing you have the power to choose.
The power to choose.
You don't have to accept the roles that society tries to impose on you.
So it's about breaking free from
limiting beliefs.
Those expectations.
Recognizing that women are not a homogenous group.
Right. They have different experiences.
Different desires.
Different aspirations.
Yeah, there's no one-size-fits-all definition of womanhood.
Now, along with this individual empowerment, de Beauvoir also stresses the need for systemic change.
Right. We got to dismantle those patriarchal systems.
The systems that perpetuate inequality.
Exactly.
Okay, so what would that look like in practice?
Well, for starters, it means equal access, education, economic opportunities.
Leveling the playing field.
Yeah, so women can truly compete.
On an equal footing.
With men.
And we need to dismantle those barriers.
Yeah, the barriers that prevent women from pursuing their careers.
Achieving their full potential.
And challenge those ingrained biases.
Like the ones that say,
women are just naturally better at nurturing. They're too emotional to be leaders.
It's frustrating how much those stereotypes still persist.
I know, it's like they never go away.
But de Beauvoir calls for us to examine those myths.
The myths that have been used to justify women's subordination.
For centuries.
So way too long.
It's about recognizing
these ideas aren't based on any inherent differences.
Between men and women.
Right. It's all about social conditioning.
Power dynamics.
Exactly.
And this dismantling of patriarchy. Also involves challenging
how we raise kids.
Boys and girls.
Both. We need to encourage girls to be ambitious.
Assertive, independent.
While also teaching boys to respect women as equals.
So it's not just about empowering women.
No.
It's also about rethinking masculinity.
Redefining what it means to be a man.
We need to create a culture that values
empathy,
collaboration,
mutual respect
between genders.
That's the key.
Raising a generation that sees beyond these rigid gender roles.
And embraces a more equitable and inclusive world.
Okay. That sounds like a big goal.
It is a big goal.
But I like it.
Yeah, it's a goal worth striving for.
And it involves creating a culture that
values women's contributions.
Yeah, their perspectives.
Not just in the home,
but in all spheres of public life.
Yes. More women in leadership positions.
And more female voices in politics.
I need every industry.
It's about making sure
that women have a seat at the table.
When decisions are being made.
That affect their lives.
And celebrating women's achievements.
Recognizing their talents and strengths.
Shifting the narrative from woman as other.
To woman as equal.
I love that.
Yeah, it's a powerful shift.
But I know all this can feel overwhelming.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
It's a huge task to tackle these systems of oppression.
But de Beauvoir reminds us that even small acts of defiance can make a difference.
So what can we as individuals actually do to make a difference?
Well, it starts with awareness.
Awareness of?
The historical and societal forces that shape gender roles.
So understanding how we got here.
Yeah, and then we can start to challenge those assumptions.
In our own lives.
In our relationships.
Our workplaces.
Even in our own beliefs.
Becoming conscious of how woman as other might still be playing out.
Yeah, even in subtle ways.
And then it's about taking action.
However small it might seem.
Like what?
Speak up against sexist jokes.
Okay.
Challenge discriminatory practices.
Support women in your life.
Who are striving to achieve their goals.
Using your voice, your choices, your action.
To chip away at that woman as other mentality.
One interaction at a time.
Every time you challenge those limiting definitions, you're creating a more just and equitable world.
For everyone.
That's the beauty of de Beauvoir's work.
What is?
It doesn't just offer a critique. It provides a roadmap for a better future.
A future where?
Women are free. Live their lives to the fullest.
That's a beautiful vision.
Yeah, it's something worth fighting for.
Well, we've reached the end of our deep dive.
Into woman as other.
I hope you found this journey.
Through history, philosophy, social change.
As enlightening as I have.
I think it's been a really rich conversation.
It really has.
And as we conclude, I want to leave you with this thought.
Okay, I'm listening.
What would your life look like if you completely abandon those limiting beliefs?
About what it means to be a woman.
What possibilities might open up?
If you embraced your full potential.
Without those constraints.
That's a powerful question.
It is.
One that I think we all need to ask ourselves.
And then answer with our actions.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Keep those wheels turning and keep pushing for a world
where every woman is free to define herself.
Couldn't have said it better myself.